But while you're doing that, let me just take a moment. Although I know she doesn't really need much of an introduction, especially when I saw the attendance list today. But we are very excited to be welcoming Pam Bennett. Many of you know her, but she's an associate professor of The Ohio State University, serves as the State Master Gardener Volunteer Program Director, and horticulture educator for OSU Extension in Clark County. In July of last year, 2020, Pam was also appointed interim program director for here at the Arboretum. So she's my boss and has been bravely steering our ship here through the pandemic. This morning, like I showed you a picture, Pam led a group of about 20 volunteers in something that she specializes in, which is herbaceous ornamental plant trials. And tonight she's doing the other thing she specializes in, which is presenting programs on horticulture topics. And she does that locally, statewide, and nationally. She's lectured in South Korea, China, Greece, and Turkey, and virtually in Italy, right, Pam? Yeah. Pam is also co-author of the award-winning book, Garden-pedia, an A to Z guide in gardening terms, writes a weekly garden column for 8 counties receiving the Cox Publishing brands, authored the bi-monthly Ask an Expert column for Ohio Gardening Magazine, and has written for gardening magazines as well as trade publications. So I know all of us are getting out our notebooks. Pam, thank you so much for making us smart today. And I will kick it over to you now. And we will stop the polling too.
All right, Julia, thank you for the kind introduction. And also, yeah, last year I was scheduled to go to Italy in May, but of course we all know what happened last year. So unfortunately, I didn't get to do that. I had to do it virtually in March. So hopefully in the future sometime I'll get a chance to go back or go for the first time. So welcome everybody, glad to have you here. See a lot of names I recognize as volunteers, Master Gardener volunteers and Chadwick volunteers, and we do appreciate all that you do to help us here at the university. So with this poll, dwarf shrubs grow how tall? Just a few of you, in fact, just 3 people have gotten this right. Rhododendrons and azaleas. The answer is false, and we are going to talk about that a little bit today. And evergreen shrubs don't lose their needles or leaves, and that also is false. So some things you're going to learn today within this quiz. The very first one we're going to start with is going to be, what is a small shrub? What is a dwarf shrub? What is a compact plant? So let's do some definitions first before we get into small shrubs for the landscape. Small typically is under 20 foot tall. So anything under 20 foot small. Now, again, that's kind of a relative term, right? Because small to me is like 2 to 3 feet, but in the classification of shrubs, small is under 20 foot tall. I found this other really interesting definition from the Great Soviet Encyclopedia in 1979 that says artificial dwarfs include oak, ginkgo, maple, cherry, and plum trees. In the lifetime of 100 years, dwarfs barely reach the height of 1 meter. Dwarf plants are widely cultivated in Japan. So there are several different types or ideas in terms of what is a dwarf plant. The dictionary says dwarf is a term often used to describe very small plants. So dwarf plants tend to be those that grow 1 to 6 inches a year. So it doesn't have to do so much with height. It has to do with their growth rate, 1 to 6 inches per year. So if you think of an example of the dwarf Alberta spruce, it's very slow growing, maybe 1 inch, couple inches if you're lucky. I don't know that I've ever seen a dwarf Alberta spruce grow 6 inches in a year. So dwarf is 1 to 6 inches in terms of growth. But what is compact? What does compact mean to you? A compact plant basically has shorter internodes, unusual characteristic, compact burning bush wings. And if you think about the dwarf compact burning bush that we like to call dwarf compact burning bush or Euonymus elatus, this is the dwarf compact burning bush. So dwarf in this case is also very relative to the species. A regular burning bush can get 25 to 30 feet tall. Dwarf compact burning bushes can be around 12 to 15 feet tall. So when you're looking to buy shrubs and it says dwarf or it says compact, you need to understand more about that particular species so that you know exactly what you're getting. Because if you got a dwarf burning bush or a compact burning bush and expected to keep it 3 to 5 feet tall, and it wasn't a cultivar that would be that tall, you're going to have a very large shrub in the landscape. So be sure you look at those species and find out what does dwarf refer to in terms of that particular species. So dwarf can be plants that are up to 20 feet tall, but they just grow very slow each year. I'm going to start with a couple, and tonight I'm going to show you, and it's going to be a real quick tour through a lot of different shrubs. I'm going to show you evergreens, some broadleaf evergreens, and also then mostly deciduous plants. I'll talk a little bit about some of these that are native. I'll talk about if they're good pollinators, but I'm going to basically kind of point out some of the benefits to these plants, and I'm going to also use some that are underused. Now, Berberis species, your species barberry, sometimes can be invasive in a landscape. I have also seen some crimson pygmy cultivars, the red cultivars. Now, whether they're actually crimson pygmy or they're a cross between crimson pygmy and something else, I have seen some red leaf cultivars also escape into natural areas. So barberries tend to be somewhat what I would say invasive. They are not on the invasive species list at this point, but there are some cultivars that I have observed that are not invasive. And this is one called Aurea. It's a yellow cultivar, and it's one that grows around 1 foot to 2 foot tall. With my barberry, I treat them as though they were perennials. Each spring, I cut them clear back to the crown, maybe about 4 to 6 inches, and I just let them basically grow as a perennial each year. So I keep them compact, I keep them small. And that's what I do with this one, and also with Bonanza Gold. This has a beautiful fall color. This is the fall color for Bonanza Gold. It has more of a yellowish early spring color, but just a great fall color. And then Golden Ruby is another one as well. But I do put barberry out there with the caveat that you might want to watch them and note to see if you are getting any escaped seedlings. Some species, especially the species in some parts of the country, can be very invasive. In Ohio, I have seen a few areas where you see them, but you don't see them taking over natural areas, at least in the areas that I've visited. A great native plant, Calycanthus Florida or Carolina allspice. Now, this is the straight species, and Carolina allspice can get around 12 to 15 inches tall. But the really beautiful piece about this plant is that flower. It's just about finished blooming in my landscape right now. It usually starts around the 1st of June, late part of May, but it has an absolutely beautiful allspice smell. It's just really a very fragrant plant. One of the downsides to this particular plant, if you look at this picture, if you look closely, let me turn my cursor on here. If you look closely here, all around here, these are all suckers. It suckers profusely. So if you have somewhat of a semi-shady or a shady area that you don't mind if this kind of takes over, which you'd rather have this take over than honeysuckle, right? It makes a beautiful understory shrub on the edge of a forest or the edge of a woodland area. And it does have that just absolutely wonderful flower in the late part of spring, early part of June. Another really cool plant that people like that you see different varieties in terms of the fruits. This is Callicarpa or beautyberry. These are the blooms that you will see right now. The blooms are really not that noticeable. They're, you might see if the plant's loaded with blooms, you might see the blooms, but most people kind of avoid or don't even notice the blooms. It's these purple fruits that are just absolutely spectacular. And they line the stems up and down the stems in the spring. Or in the fall rather. I have seen birds eat them, so the birds will clear them out. And this plant, beautyberry, can get around 6 feet to 8 feet tall. Now, there are other different cultivars. There are some short compact cultivars, and there's also a pink cultivar, but you can see this can get quite large. But in the fall, when there's very little else showing this color, you see these beautiful purple berries that will last not through the winter, but usually last up until maybe around October, November. So that's beautyberry or Callicarpa. Another one that I treat as a small shrub or a subshrub in the landscape is Caryopteris. This one is beautiful for pollinators. Bees, hummingbirds, butterflies absolutely flock to this plant. It blooms in September. It can get a little bit larger than what you see here. However, I cut it back again, much like I do barberry. And you're going to hear me say this about a few different shrubs tonight, that each spring I cut them back to the crown or about 4 inches above the crown. And then I have this nice compact plant. So I treat them as a perennial in most cases. But this one starts blooming in September. So you don't have a lot of color again in September. You know, most people think fall mums and your kale, your cabbage, and so forth, asters maybe. But this one is a great shrub that blooms in September. And if you prune it like I do, the species you can keep to around a foot, foot and a half. Now, it hasn't been extremely winter hardy the last 5-6 years. I lose pieces of it, or I've lost whole plants in general. So I will always continue to plant it though, because I can buy it as a perennial, treat it as a perennial, and have this great fall blooming, as well as a wonderful pollinator plant for the fall. This is a cultivar called Blue Mist, which has more of a true purplish blue flower, and a cultivar called Worcester Gold. And I noticed a couple other cultivars are now coming out on the market as well. Again, Worcester Gold, if I didn't prune it back to the ground each year, or back to the crown, it would be a little more straggly, a little more open, a little more shrubby or woody. In this case, again, as I treat it as a perennial, this is what you'll see, a 2.5 foot plant with the flowers on it in the fall. And of course, this has the variegated yellow and green foliage. One of my favorites, just absolutely love this plant, Cephalanthus occidentalis, or buttonbush. This is an Ohio native plant, absolutely wonderful for pollinators. It is a beautiful blooming plant in August and September. Has these wonderful little flowers that look like buttons, and they last for quite a period of time. You can find this along the edge of a woods, like you see here. It also can tolerate some damp soils. In fact, we went on where our Parks District is looking at a particular piece of land that has some wet areas in it, almost like a marshy area, and it was loaded with buttonbush. So I'm so excited to see that, because it's going to be beautiful this fall again when I see it bloom. But this can get around 15 feet tall, very rounded. This is its natural form. When you look at it here, it's not been pruned. And again, it gives you that beautiful color in August and September in the landscape that just really pops when you find this along the shrub or the woody border. And there's a close up again of the flowers. Kind of almost reminds you of the coronavirus, doesn't it? I think Chaenomeles, speciosa, or flowering quince is extremely underused and has a lot of potential. Now, the species flowering quince can get around 12 to 15 feet tall. It's a very rounded plant, rounded shrub. But again, our breeders today are looking for plants that are shorter, more compact, more suitable for the urban landscape. You know, some of these plants like buttonbush, you're not going to put the species buttonbush in a small urban neighborhood unless you have a pretty big backyard area where you can just, let it go, because it'll get 10 feet wide, 12 feet tall. So Double Take, this series is a flowering quince series that's only about 2 to 3 feet tall. So it's going to stay nice and compact without pruning. And you'll notice many times too, when when there's breeding going on, they're looking for better characteristics. This particular series has just multiple flowers compared to the species. And you can see it's double flowers and it's thornless. So flowering quince has thorns. They have great fruits. If you like quince fruits, they will produce fruits. But this particular one is thornless. And I've never really seen any great development of fruit on Double Take, the short compact series. But I think flowering quince has a great, great location in the landscape. It blooms in April, just before the leaves come out, when there's very few other things blooming. So you get that really early spring flowering. Clethra, summer sweet Clethra, anifolia, 16 candles. This is one cultivar. Another one called Ruby Spice, and another one called Hummingbird. And if you look at all these, they have beautiful white flowers, or with Ruby Spice, they're pink flowers. They are a native plant, but they really like moisture. I've got 5 of them out in front and the front of my house, and it is kind of dry during the summer. And if I don't water my annuals and plants that are in there, they will be kind of short and squatty. If you put them in a really moist area or a damp soil, doesn't have to be wet, just damp, they will thrive, and they will also sucker and spread profusely. So if you have kind of a semi-shady area, or the edge of a border, or the edge of a tree area that has some moisture in it, these are perfect. And again, the flowers come on in August and they're just full of almost like a bottle brush flower. And they're absolutely beautiful. And again, the different cultivars will help guide the height. Ruby Spice is about, let's say Ruby Spice is around 2.5 feet tall. Hummingbird is short and compact. So there are different cultivars of summer sweet Clethra that will grow well in our landscapes. And here's an early picture of one in my landscape in the front, just before it blooms. And there's a close-up shot of the raceme, which is the bloom itself. Cotoneaster, or cotton Easters, people used to say when I worked in the garden center, I sold a lot of Cotoneaster apiculata, Cotoneaster damerai. You hardly see them anymore in the landscape. They were used a lot in commercial plantings. They were a great ground cover, very easy to grow, not a whole lot of problems, although I've seen some lace bug damage to them. But the downside with the apiculata that we noticed was that in the wintertime, when they lose their foliage, they tend to hold a lot of debris. So leaves, paper, particularly if they're in a parking lot or commercial area where there's trash, they do tend to collect the trash. So they're not used that much anymore. One I think that still has great value is a Cotoneaster damerai called Tom Thumb. This is a short compact. This is its mature height, about a foot high, a foot tall by about 2 foot wide. Green foliage, red flower, or red berries, but that red fall color is just spectacular. You can see it here in the fall when the daylilies are just starting to turn yellow. Just makes a really nice ground cover, and it has a little bit different stem habits so that it doesn't collect trash like the apiculata does. Most people are familiar with our Cornus serracea, the red twig dogwood. This is just your species red twig dogwood. But the great thing about these varieties, the Cornus, the red twig dogwood, are the cultivars. This is one. Those of you who work over in Chadwick Arboretum are probably very familiar with this one called Midwinter Fire. And those of you who work there realize that this picture is quite old. I've had this picture for quite a while because the plants that are in that area right now are much, much, much larger than this. One of the things I really like about Cornus, well, one thing I don't like and one thing I do like. So the variegated red twig dogwood, for instance, you'll find gets Botrisphaeria, which is a disease that causes browning and the gray stems. You'll see specks on the stem and the stem just dies back. So they get it almost every year. What I do is in the early spring, after they've gone through their winter and they look great in the winter landscape, I cut them clear back to the crown again, about 4 to 6 inches off the ground. And those new branches that come up and grow then are very clean, take a while before they get Botrisphaeria, and look really good then throughout the next year or possibly 2 or 3 seasons. So when they get Botrisphaeria, for my mind, instead of cutting out the branches, and I certainly don't try to spray because it's not worth spraying, I just cut them back and let them rejuvenate and look great then the next seasons. But again, there's orange stems, there's several different stems. And of course, these twigs are great to use in winter arrangements, winter porch arrangements, pots, containers, things like that. And they can get around 10 feet tall, depending on the cultivar, if you don't rejuvenate them and prune them back every so many years. So I tend to go in and prune mine back. Now you're going to look at me and say, oh, well, euonymus, well, that's invasive. Well, it has been considered invasive. It's not invasive everywhere in the country. We are seeing it in some places in Ohio. It's certainly not as invasive as we've seen the Callery pear become. Notice this is compactus, 9 to 10 foot tall. So it's a very compact plant compared to the species. There's another one called Rudy Hague that's about 3 to 5 foot tall. You will see euonymus cultivars reseed in some cases. I have 3 of the Rudy Hagues. They are probably 5 feet. I have never pruned them since I've had them. They just grow beautifully each year. I had some dieback on them a couple winters ago when it got really cold, but I am watching underneath and I have not yet seen in my entire perennial border any seedlings. So I do watch for this just to make sure and kind of keep an eye on, are they starting to be invasive in my particular garden? And there, I don't throw the baby out with the bathwater in this case. If everybody says euonymus is invasive, I'm gonna look at the science behind it and find out where is it invasive, how bad of a problem is it? And is it something that we do need to be concerned about? So this is one that I put in here. I have 3 of them, but I kind of shy away from planting, kind of shy away from using them in any landscape designs, just because of the fact that I have seen them reseed. Fothergilla gardeni. I love the name Fothergilla, but I also love the plant itself. The plant is just absolutely beautiful when it blooms in the spring. This is a deciduous shrub. It is usually found in the southeastern United States in terms of native. It can get anywhere from 5 to 8 feet tall, depending on your cultivar. I'm sorry, not 5 to 8 feet, 1 to 3 feet. What am I talking about? 1 to 3 feet tall, depending on the cultivar, and about a spread of about the same. It blooms in May, and it has this beautiful bottle brush bloom that is super fragrant. So I've got mine, I've got my windows right here in the house to my left, and I've got them planted right outside this window. So in the spring, when I can open up the windows and get that fresh spring air in there, I also have that smell of the Fothergilla coming in. So this is your species Fothergilla. There's Mount Airy, which gets 4 to 5 feet tall. And there's one called Blue Mist that has more of a bluish cast to the foliage. And it truly is, it does have a bluish cast. There are some along Chadwick Arboretum in front of Howlett Hall that you might see that have been there many years, still doing quite well. And this is another great feature that people like about Fothergilla is the fall color. Beautiful fall color that will be persistent for about a month in late September, early October. So it's getting great fall color. Nice shrub if you get them small, put them in the front foundation, front of the house where they can stay compact and you don't have to do any pruning. Hamamels or Hamamels, depending on what you like to call it. I usually call it Hamamels. This is witch hazel. I have pictures here of the hybrids, although there is a native witch hazel, Hamamels vernalis, which you will find blooming in October and November in the woodland areas. It gets around 15 to 20 feet tall, very open, very spreading, and it has yellow flowers in October, November. And then the other hybrids typically bloom anywhere from January, February into March. And sometimes if the weather conditions last, you might get them start blooming in February and go clear through till the end of March if we don't have any really warm spells during the season. It is a native understory shrub. It needs to be somewhat protected. I would not put it, I've got 5 acres. I've got a row of trees around the outside edge. I've got it located right in the front of those trees, meaning understory, right underneath the tall trees. I don't have it in deep shade, and I don't have it on the west side of the house where it's in full sun, where it would not thrive as much. This is a cultivar that's called Angeli. And you can see this up at Seacrest Arboretum, very bright yellow. And another cultivar that's very popular called Diane. There are several different colors. Most of them are in the yellows and the oranges. I have found, though, in my own landscape, I have 3 of them. I have 2 yellow that are out in front, and they're a distance away from the front landscape. And I have an orange one that's in the back that's like right outside my garage door, about 15, 20 feet. The yellow in a landscape in a distance are going to show up much more than the orange. The orange are beautiful. In fact, many of them have beautiful fragrances rather. They smell wonderful. So I would put the oranges, the kind of muted colors, closer to the house where I'm going to see them and appreciate them more. And then the ones that are yellow, I put out in the landscape. And when I say distance, we're probably talking about maybe 200 feet from my house to the front part of the landscape where I have it. And it's vivid in the winter months when it's in bloom. So it's one of my favorite plants. And then we have the H's, hydrangeas. There are lots of hydrangeas, and there are several different species of hydrangeas. There are your smooth hydrangeas, which is this one, Hydrangea arborescens. There's several different cultivars. This is Hayes Starburst. This is Annabelle. Annabelle is rather large. I'm not going to go into all the different cultivars. There, Eric Barrett, who is in Mahoning County, does a great program on all the different cultivars. We have a great fact sheet on all the cultivars. And just as I tell you about some of my favorite cultivars, tomorrow you're going to find 10 or more new favorite cultivars, because they are coming out with hydrangeas so fast that I think hydrangeas are going to become the honey locust of shrubs. You know, when you find honey locust, you plant them everywhere. Or how about Stella d'Oro daylily? We plant them everywhere. Well, now you're going to find hydrangeas. Well, you pretty much do find them everywhere in all commercial landscapes. But they're beautiful. There's a reason why they're used, and they just keep getting better each year. Annabelle's a very large shrub. It can get 10 to 15 feet tall with extremely large, almost not quite volleyball, not quite basketball size flowers, but very large flowers. Then you have one called Endless Summer, which is a smooth hydrangea. Endless Summer was discovered by Michael Durr, and it was put out there, and it was just, I mean, it took the world by storm. You know, you've got these beautiful pink large flowers in the summer, midsummer, but in the summer was not necessarily hardy. And it would bloom on old wood and new wood, and you would just see a lot of dieback every year. And Michael Durr, the one who found this plant and discovered it and grew it, will also tell you, I sat next to him at one of our state conferences, and he said, it's a dog. It's a dog. I mean, everybody still sells it, it's out there, but there are many better hydrangea arborescens that are just much, much improved over that. But you'll still see it in the landscape, but it's just not extremely winter hardy. I have a few of them, and they get knocked back every year. I prune all the dead wood off. They come out and they bloom and they look great, but they don't bloom on last year's wood because that is just not winter hardy. Then you have your panicled, hydrangeas. I was going to call them arborvitaes. They have upright panicle flowers, and this is paniculata limelight. And limelight was one of the early ones that came out, and limelight gets around 12 to 15 feet tall. This is the back of my house, and I keep limelight pruned so that every year it's around 3 to 3.5 feet tall and sits right below my windows in my great room. And I do that by basically pruning it back every year back to the crown of the plant, and the new growth comes out, and I'll get a very compact plant. Now there's a downside to this. Because it's compact, the blooms are bigger. And because the blooms are bigger, they are more sensitive to a windstorm or a heavy rain. You can see along the bottom here where you see the blooms kind of hanging. These are all kind of weighed down because of the size of the blooms. But I like it here because it's right behind the house. It's tucked in, doesn't necessarily get a lot of wind and a lot of rain, and it works well right there. And then in the winter, of course, the winter months, it just looks fantastic all throughout the winter. And I cut it back to about right here, early in the spring before it starts to grow. And there's a winter picture of panicula or limelight at our old office as well. It just has great winter characteristics. Here's an early blooming one that we did not cut back. And this is what it will do if you don't cut it back. This is about 12 feet tall, with lots of blooms, but the blooms are smaller. So you have to decide on, you know, what you want. But again, know that if you do cut it back, you're going to get bigger blooms, but you're going to get heavier blooms. So if you are going for that cut dried flower, I cut them and I stick them up in I got a little alcove up here with a window, and I've got great big blossoms that are real showy in that particular case. Another one that everybody loves and is still popular is called vanilla strawberry, which when it first starts blooming, it has kind of a creamy white, which then turns to the pink. And then it also has the dark red stems. And here is an early on the left, vanilla strawberry blooming on the left, limelight on the right, vanilla strawberry as it starts to senesce, as it really starts to fade. And then this is what it looks like in the fall. So it does have beautiful color, and that color will stay as a cut or dried flower for quite some time in the fall part of the season. And here's another example of later in the fall. The color is just vivid. And then one year, the vanilla strawberries at the very end of the limelight, one year I thought, wow, did the deer come up and just chew off all my vanilla strawberry blooms? I thought, what's going on here? Why didn't they touch limelight? Then it dawned on me, they don't stay on the stems like limelight does. They actually just break off very early in the winter part of the season. So this is what my vanilla strawberry looks like all winter, and this is what limelight looks all winter. So those are those nuances of plants that are worth trialing and learning about before you make those purchases. Another one called Little Lime, which is excellent for small landscapes. Little Lime, that is the mature height. Now I do cut it back again every year, particularly since it's kind of right over a path, so I will cut it back. but it has a very compact growth habit, more about 3 feet tall than Limelight. Shazam, another one. This one, it has been in my landscape for many years without any pruning whatsoever. It is a paniculata variety, and you can see it's probably about 8 feet tall. Has filled in quite nicely, and I don't do any pruning to it at all. Another one, another variety, your quercifolia or your oak leaf. So another species. These are just starting to bloom right now. Your arborescens are going to be a little bit later in the summer. Limelight's not even quite ready. That'll be more July, but our quercifolia or oak leaf hydrangeas are just now starting. A cultivar called Snow Queen, large white flowers, beautiful fall color. This is one that I have next to my Limelight. This is called Peewee, and it is about approximately 4 feet tall right now and 4 feet wide, much smaller than the species quercifolia. But again, almost all your quercifolia varieties or cultivars have wonderful fall color. Another one called Sykes Dwarf. So these are oak leaf hydrangeas, which have the beautiful exfoliating foliage, which bloom on last year's wood. So that means you don't want to cut them back in the spring. And in fact, I don't even prune these. The flower heads, as they die out, you can't even see them hardly. If you look at this, you can hardly see them on here in the late summer. They tend to fall off. So I don't do any pruning on the quercifolias whatsoever. Itea. Itea is another really cool flower that is blooms in the early part of the summer, midsummer. And this one is Henry's Garnet. It is wonderful for butterflies, pollinators. I will mention pollinators on the hydrangeas. Almost all of them, I've seen great pollinators, except for some of them that have more of the male, the lace cap varieties. They have more male flowers than female. I don't see many pollinators on them, but I do see a lot of them on almost all the other hydrangeas. But this is Itea, a small compact shrub, about 3 feet tall max, which has absolute beautiful fall color on the cultivar called Little Henry. Wonderful fall color, this burnished red, and has that bloom in the summer. So Itea is excellent to use. Now, I do find that Itea tend to like it on the moist side, not wet, not damp, or not dry, but right in the middle, a good, well-drained, moist soil, which most plants like that, but this one actually will do much better in a moist soil. Wonder how many of you are familiar with Colquitzia. Colquitzia is an old-time shrub. I learned it in school with Steve Still when he was my professor for landscape plants. The species Colquitzia amabilis, and for the life of me, Kathy Burkholder put in the common name. I can't think of the common name. But it has beautiful pink flowers. This is one that came out several years ago called Dreamcatcher, and it is a short, compact variety. So it's only about 2.5 feet tall, but it has that beautiful chartreuse foliage, and it has these really pretty pink flowers in the spring. Actually, not spring, late spring, early summer, right about now. But it has the chartreuse foliage more than anything, because you really don't see, I mean, this is in bloom right now, and you barely see the flowers on there. So it's really known more for its foliage than anything else. But you can see a couple of them here in the landscape, which are nice, low growing, like I said, 2 to 3 foot tall with about a 3 foot spread. And with Dreamcatcher, the early new growth that comes out is orangish, and then it fades to the chartreuse yellow. These are without a doubt totally underused. I love Potentilla. It's a very old plant, Potentilla fruticosa. The species has been around forever. I used to sell tons of them when I worked back in my garden center days in the 80s, because they were a great flowering shrub for all summer long. I treat these just like I do my perennials. I will cut them back. I'll rejuvenate them in the early spring before they start growing. And you've heard me mention that several times. If you're going to rejuvenate a shrub, you want to do it in the early spring before they grow. All that energy is stored in the ground in the winter. And if you let them go into the spring and bloom and flower and so forth, they may be struggling after you cut them back, because you're cutting back all the sugars that were stored for the winter. But if you do it in the spring, then they send up and push up new growth. And when I do that on Potentilla, they're a much more compact, much nicer looking plant that will bloom starting in July, clear through almost till the end of August. They're usually around 2 to 3 feet tall by about the same spread. This is one called Goldfinger, but I think they're wonderful additions to a perennial border as a shrub that you treat as a perennial by just cutting it back in the spring. Physocarpus. Physocarpus or nine bark has been used considerably, and you'll see a lot of different cultivars right now. This is one of the earlier ones that came out many years ago called Coppertina. Coppertina can get pretty large, 12, 15 feet tall, has flowers that bloom in July. Excellent flowers for pollinators. There's several cultivars of Physocarpus. This is one called Little Devil that has pinkish flowers. And I have had this one for probably about 10 years now. It got to the point 2 years ago where it started to get some dead wood, some old wood in it. And so I cut it back, rejuvenated it. And right now it looks, for 2 years, it looks fantastic. It looks about like this again. But it has pinkish flowers in July and blooms for about a month. The only thing that we have seen on Physocarpus, and if you have Physocarpus, I'm guessing you have probably seen this at some point, they're very susceptible to powdery mildew. And sometimes it seems to be cultivar specific, like Coppertina seems to really get it. I don't ever think I've seen it on Little Devil. So if somebody wants a really good research project, planting all the different nine barks and observing them and trying to figure out which ones are susceptible and which ones are resistant to the powdery mildew. It never tends to get to a point where it really, I've never seen it kill the shrub, but I have seen it get to the point where it really makes the Physocarpus or the nine bark look really bad. So what I would do if that got to be the case, I just cut it back in the middle of summer. It's a pretty hardy plant that it will come back. It will send some sprouts back. It might slow it down for a little while, but it's better than looking really ratty like this in the entire landscape. So just keep your eyes out for it. And like I said, chances are you have seen powdery mildew on it, and it hits it so bad that it just actually gnarls the leaves and kind of curls the foliage. Heard somebody talk about making elderberry. I think it was Julia. She made elderberry, what was it, a cordial? Excellent fruit. You see a lot about elderberry. And if you were part of the Master Gardener Lunch and Learn and Happy Hour series, we had a speaker from Missouri talk about elderberry. This is black lace. Black lace can get about 10 feet tall, pink blooms. The species are in bloom right now in Central Ohio. The cultivars haven't quite started. Mine has not started yet, but I expect them to start blooming soon. Another group of plants that I treat as a perennial is the Spirea. These are the smaller ones. Little Princess Spirea, Spirea Big Bang, Spirea Magic Carpet, another one Magic Carpet, Magic Carpet again. I will prune all of these back flat to the ground. Well, not flat, back to about 6 inches, 4 inches off the ground in the early spring when I go back in and trim my perennials. That way I get this nice compact plant. I have a couple other taller spireas like Gold Flame in my perennial bed. When it finishes blooming, which it's almost finished right now, I'm going to go in and cut it halfway back. I will get a flush of growth and a second set of blooms instead of trying to deadhead individuals. So I do these smaller shrubs. There's just a small group of them, like I said, that I will treat like perennials, and they just look so much better than letting them grow to their natural height and size, and they get kind of straggly. Your lilacs, I'm not going to go into all the lilacs. This is Meyeri Miss Kim. There are several varieties with cultivars that are available. We had a speaker for Tree University several months ago talking about lilacs. They're a great early spring bloomer. And your old-fashioned lilacs, I don't think you can beat the smell for that old-fashioned lilac smell, but keep in mind, old-fashioned lilacs get really large. Meyeri Miss Kim is going to be one of your more compact varieties. I'm really not sure about Weigela. This is Wine and Roses that came out several years ago, but it's not what I would say incredibly hardy. There's a variegated cultivar that came out that's not hardy. I have some species that tend to have some dieback and just woody in them after a couple of years. So I started treating my Weigelas like a perennial, and I cut them back every 2 to 3 years back to the ground because I just haven't seen any really good ones that bloom and look like this all summer and remain hardy and have full foliage coming back the next year. It tends to be where they get a lot of dieback, but I just want to point that out there that there are some compact Weigelas out there, but I think they're going to do better in a protected location. All right, let's get into a few evergreens here and then we'll wrap it up. This is your standard foundation plant right now: boxwood, Buxus green gem, boxwood green velvet, boxwood green Buxus green mound, green mountain. There are all different cultivars of boxwoods available. They are wonderful plants, don't get me wrong, but if you look at many housing areas and suburban home areas, boxwood, kind of like we also used to always use taxus or junipers all the time, boxwood are very overused. I am of the belief and philosophy that if I'm going to put a shrub in, I'm not going to prune it unless I absolutely want a shrub in a certain location, and then I might prune it. These boxwoods are in the front of my house right now. Green gem is probably about 4 feet tall. Green mountain, I'm sorry, is about 4 feet tall. Green gem, the rounded ones, are about, not quite up to my window, they're about 2 feet tall. That is about where they're going to stay. That I've picked them for that particular area because they're not going to get that big. I don't want to get large plants and then have to prune them, shear them, trim them, create ball bushes or pyramidal bushes. I don't want any of that. I want them in their natural form and natural habitat. Green mountain can get 3 to 5 feet tall, but you can see I have them down in this area, and they can stand to be 3 to 5 feet tall right there. And then green gem is about 3 feet max. Now I'm showing you the brown because boxwood in a really windy, dry winter will show winter burn just like this. And if it's really, really bad, they could even show winter kill if you get a below 40 degree or below 0 degree temperature like we had in the 40s in 2014. We got some significant boxwood die back in 2014. The new growth will come out, will push out. The best thing to do in this case is to prune it. The best thing to do is don't put it on the the south or the west side of the house. Of course, I put it on the south side of the house, which is facing the full sun. And because it's an evergreen, as a broadleaf evergreen, that the wind will move across those broadleaves and take out the moisture. And if it's dry and the ground's frozen, it's not taking in moisture. But I've actually only had this happen twice and had to prune it back twice. So I'm not really too concerned about it. They actually are doing pretty decent in this location, despite me saying don't put them on the south side. But just realize that you could be susceptible to that boxwood burn. I love Chamaecyparis. You see them a lot in display gardens, public gardens. You don't see them a lot in backyard gardens or front landscapes because most people buy them and then just shear them or prune them and keep them so tight that they just don't look very pretty. This is one called Passifera foliifera. This is Passifera mops. Now notice how big this is. This is about 6 foot wide by about 3 foot, 4 foot tall. People will buy these and then they will keep them sheared, squared off, and have them grow just, in a square shrub. That's against my philosophy. I like to see plants in their natural habitat. So if you're going to put this in an area that's 3 feet wide by 6 feet wide, you may be doing some pruning if you don't have enough space for it. So I'm always a big proponent of right plant, right location, and knowing what that full maximum growth height is going to be. Another one called Curly Top. It's not a juniper, it is a Chamaecyparis, but they're just really cool plants for something different in the landscape. And you can find quite a few dwarf. This is Obtusa nana, and this is a very, very, very slow growing plant that has great foliage, just doesn't need pruned ever, but just looks really good in the landscape. Another favorite of mine that most people despise because they're prickly and stickly, but I love junipers. There's nothing better for a really dry, hot landscape area. Curb lawns. This is one hanging down over the border. This is blue rug, the kind of standard carpet juniper. Another one called tam juniper, but look at that beautiful structure to that plant compared to if you go in and shear it off like everybody wants to. So finding that plant for the location that's going to fit in that location and look good, in my opinion, is very important. Green mound, Juniper procumbens, green mound, Japanese garden juniper, one that's been around for a long time, and I still see it used. They are susceptible to some diseases. They definitely are susceptible to bagworms. So if you have bagworms, you kind of have to keep an eye out for them. But with some of these, because they're short, they're compact, it's easy to keep an eye out for them. And if you start to see the bags forming in the summer, just remove them by hand before you get a population build up. Sea green, another one I like, large juniper, blue Pacific, another one, blue chip. I can keep going on and on. Calgary carpet, Saybrook gold, Gold Coast, sea green. These last two pictures are exactly where these types of plants should go. You know, juniper Gold Coast, juniper sea green is the one that people will put out by their foundation and then shear it and trim it every year. Sea green can get around 8 feet wide by about 4 to 5 feet tall, but look at that in terms of the texture in the landscape, the beauty of that hedge. That's exactly where they need to go. So these aren't necessarily small landscape shrubs. They can be pruned if you use some tactical pruning, where you're just removing some of the longer tips down into the plant, so you can keep them with the shape and a little bit smaller. But again, I prefer to look for plants and put them in their area where they're really going to grow in their natural shape and size. Bird's nest spruce. So you've got dwarf Alberta spruce that you'll see people plant a lot. Picea abies. This is nidiformis or bird's nest. This truly is a dwarf plant because it only grows 1 to 2 inches a year. So it's going to take a very long time to get to this point. And then we have Pinus Mugho. Mugho pines get 20 foot tall. Compact Mugho pines get 8 to 9 foot tall. When I would sell these in the landscape, people thought that compact Mugho pine meant it was only going to get 3 to 4 feet. But you can see a compact Mugho pine is just more compact than the species of 20 feet tall. So again, to go back to the very first question, compact dwarf plants, they can be all different sizes depending on the species. And the word compact is relative. Taxus were overused in the landscape. Then we switched to boxwoods. I still prefer taxus in many cases if they're in their natural form. Let's just stop pruning them in squares and the shapes and you know, the round balls for arborvitaes. Taxus, this is a short growing taxus, Everlow, that looks fantastic in landscape and makes a great foundation planting if you want something in a large area, you have a large brick wall, something like that. This will get around 2 feet tall and spread by about 4 feet. Taxus do not like water, so make sure you keep them away from wet soils, keep them away from drain pipes. And for that matter, boxwoods aren't going to do well if the soil stays saturated and soaking wet, or if you have an irrigation system where you just constantly keep using it and constantly keep watering. An arborvita, Thuya bowling ball. This one is only going to get around 2 feet by 2 feet, and it stays very compact, has a really nice texture in the landscape. Putting this in a landscape, several in a row, really makes kind of a cool impact, a cool aesthetic look. Doesn't need pruned. It grows in this shape, nice rounded mound, and will stay like that all year long. Ilex crenata. Ilex crenata is a holly that is perfect for shade. It will do well in shade. It is the inkberry, or no, is it inkberry? Glaber's inkberry. It is a holly that is more of an upright. It does not have your beautiful flowers or your beautiful berries on it, but it is a really nice border type holly to put in the shade. And has this lustrous green new foliage, and then the old foliage turns brown. It's going to get around 4 to 5 feet tall, and it's more of a narrow, 2 to 3 feet wide. It's more of a narrow plant. Our native Ilex glabra, not native to our area, but native to the United States, Ilex glabra compacta, is a deciduous holly. So it will lose its leaves. Sometimes it will stay evergreen, depending on where you're located, probably south of Cincinnati area, it would stay evergreen, but it is another holly that can be used in the landscape. But as you see, it doesn't have the red berries, it has our black berries. You've got several different types of the Missouri hollies. These are usually hybrids. This is Blue Princess, Blue Prince. You've got China Boy, China Girl. These are a struggle to grow in Central Ohio. And I mentioned in the quiz azaleas and rhododendrons, they are ericaceous. They fit in with that group of plants. And if you don't have a good pH of 5 to 6, 6.5, you are going to struggle growing these in central Ohio. Our compact clay soils, number one, the drainage is poor. They don't like poorly drained soils. And number two, they don't like a 7.4, 7.5 pH. So if you indeed want these red holly berries, you're going to have to put some extra work into growing them. If you got one to grow to its natural height around 10 feet tall, I would be really impressed, because typically you don't see them like this. My friend has one that is probably 5 feet tall, and it's been in there probably 20 years now. They just aren't fast growers in our soil, but they are very pretty. Keep in mind, when you have these, you have to have one male to all the females in order to have berries. You have to have that male pollinator, because they will cross-pollinate the female flowers, and you will have berries. But if you don't have at least one male tucked in among your females, you're not going to have berries unless there's somebody else nearby that has a male holly. Calmia latifolia, about a month, maybe 3 weeks ago, I saw people in the Tennessee area just bragging about Calmia in bloom. It is a plant that will grow around here, but it is, again, ericaceous. It likes a soil that has a little bit of acidic soil to it, not the basic soil that we have. And it gets to be around 3 feet tall, has beautiful blooms, just gorgeous flowers in the spring. But you're going to probably struggle to find it here. If you have a place up in Akron, Canton area, where rhododendrons and azaleas grow wonderfully, they will do quite well, or it will do quite well in that area. Leucothoe is one that kind of sort of grows around here, but again, it is another ericaceous plant. So it's one that you're going to have to give the treatment to. I have them in my landscape, and I do. Each year I add elemental sulfur to keep my soil pH down, because they are just so cool, the little fairy bell-like flowers that bloom in the spring. But this is a one particular one called Gerard's Rainbow, but they're not going to get any size like you would see them in Tennessee and Georgia and further in the South, where they have the right growing conditions. Mahonia is one that does like, it is an ericaceous plant, meaning it's an acid-loving plant, but it will grow in our soils much easier than all of the other ones. And this is Oregon grape holly. And you can see the blooms look like a holly. It has the white flowers or yellow flowers in the spring, and then in the summer and fall, it will have bluish purple fruits that look like grapes. So it is one that will grow in shade, that will do much better than any of the rhododendrons, azaleas, and so forth in our area. It's supposed to be evergreen. It would be evergreen farther south of here. It tends to, the leaves just kind of look really straggly and ugly in the fall, pushes those leaves off in the spring, and new growth comes out. As with all of these other evergreens, if you answered that evergreen leaves do not stay on forever, evergreens do lose their leaves at some point in time, whether it's pines losing their 2 to 3 year old needles or 4-year-old needles, whether it's coming back through Florida and Georgia, all of the Magnolia grandiflora, the beautiful large magnolias, they will lose their leaves. So all of our evergreens and broadleaf evergreen plants lose older leaves at some point in time. Taxus will drop their older needles in the spring. Boxwood usually drop them in the spring as well. Arborvitae will drop them in the fall. And of course, our pines, we tend to see that in the fall. So under any of your evergreens or broadleaf evergreens, you will find leaf drop at some point in time, because that's just normal. They don't keep them forever, but they do remain on the plant throughout the winter months. Myrica pennsylvanicum, bayberry, and this is just such a great plant. It is a very large plant. It can get around, much like the button bush, around 12 feet tall, nice rounded mound. But if you scratch that stem, or you scratch those berries, you have that beautiful, I'm sorry, I said bayberry, winterberry. You have that beautiful winterberry smell. It's just a beautiful smell, beautiful fragrance. It can be semi-evergreen in some locations, but again, it will push out new leaves in the spring because those leaves just look awful in the winter months. But again, it's another really good one if you have the space to put in a 10-foot tall rounded shrub that just has these beautiful grayish blue berries that have just a wonderful fragrance. And lastly, another one that I try to push the envelope with in my landscape. This is another ericaceous plant, Pyrus japonica, Japanese Pyrus, that has these beautiful blooms in May. I've got 5 of them that I've been babying for the last several years. One that I've had for probably 10 years, still looks good, but I've got them tucked up among other plants where they're not going to get any kind of winter injury. And I also am adding elemental sulfur each year to keep my soil pH down enough so that they will grow. They don't thrive, but they grow, and they do give me some enjoyment because they are very pretty in the early part of the spring. So with that, Miss Julia, we are right at 7 o'clock. How about that? That's pretty amazing. And ready for some questions.
Wonderful. Great. All right. Well, we'll just jump right on in. How about we start with one of the most popular questions that we had? Could you just sort of do a quick recap of what are the best shrubs for pollinators, and what are the best native shrubs for pollinators?
Okay, so starting in winter with witch hazel, excellent for pollinators, is a native plant. So that's the first one to bloom. And then you come into spring, and Fothergilla, not native, but excellent for pollinators. Very good. They love the bottle brush. Your Itea, your Clethra, summer sweet Clethra. Summer sweet Clethra is wonderful for pollinators. Your sweet shrub is a very good one for pollinators, and is also, or I'm sorry, Carolina allspice, very good for pollinators, and blooms in the spring and is native. Let's see what else. Button bush, of course, a summer bloomer, native plant for pollinators. Spirea, yes, on pollinators, but if I had to say, are they just like attracted like crazy? Probably not as much. And Spirea is not native. I already said Hamamels. Oh gosh, let me run back here and do my slides this way. Go page up. Boxwoods, actually, boxwoods are not native, but many people don't realize pollinators love them. If you watch them early in the spring when they're blooming, they attract all kinds of flies, bees, some of our native bees. So boxwoods are actually, they're not native, but they actually do a pretty good job of attracting pollinators. Let's see, page up. Weigelia, no. Lilacs, not so much in terms of attracting pollinators. Colquitzia, or beauty bush, the name just came to me, is good for pollinators. The Sambucus, or elderberry. Yeah, Kathy mentions her bottle brush buckeye. Absolutely, buckeyes are great for pollinators. I also notice on Physocarpus, or the 9-bark, that they do a really good job of attracting pollinators. And our hydrangeas, now we do have a native hydrangea. All the ones I showed you, of course, are not native. They're all the introductions, and they're all the cultivars or hybrids. But hydrangeas are excellent for pollinators. And I would not say too much about the red twig dogwood being that great for pollinators. I don't know that that really would be good. I mentioned the Clethra, summer sweet Clethra, and also for pollinators, Chaenomeles, quince, flowering quince, really good for early season pollinators. And then Caryopteris is very good for pollinators. And when it comes to pollinators, I try to find some in the spring, some in the summer, and some in the fall. So I'll have shrubs in the spring or in the winter, like my witch hazels are in the winter. Then I've got my spring shrubs. Then I have my summer, and of course the fall, the Caryopteris in the fall, and the button bush. So try to find some that are in each season.
Okay. Do you use roosts in the landscape?
I do not. The only reason I do not, there's roost tiger eyes, the yellow one. They sucker and spread like crazy. And so I've kind of stayed away from them because of that fact. I did plant one last year. I thought, well, I could use a little bit of yellow. Tiger eyes is yellow. It's a great plant, 5 feet tall at the most. The species is very interesting. They have really interesting blooms. They have good leaf structure to them. But I don't like the way they sucker. And I don't, in this area where I put it, I'm going to have to really do a good job on controlling it.
Mhm. How about contorted filbert? Can you recommend that?
Yeah, I like contorted filbert. I don't have it in here. The only downside that I have found to contorted filbert is it is susceptible to eastern filbert blight. And we have seen it in Ohio in years past. And basically the stems get kind of a almost reminds you of a cicada egg-laying slit. They get these little slits in them, and then the spores start coming out of there, and it ends up killing the branches. So is that a reason not to plant it? No, not at all. If you have one, they really are fun. They give you great, great interest, and also cut twigs for winter decorations are wonderful. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't have any willows in here, and I love willows, but remember, these are kind of smaller shrubs for the landscape.
Mhm. Let's just recap how you prune, especially hydrangeas, and how do you determine which ones you cut back, which ones you shouldn't?
Okay, so the key is to know the species. And if you don't know the species off the top of your head, like you don't know if it's an arborescens or smooth or quercifolia, look at the flowers. Do the flowers bloom on old wood or new wood? Remember, I mentioned limelight. I cut back every spring. That's because it blooms on new wood. If I cut it back it blooms it comes up in the spring, and I cut it, it'll keep growing, and I cut it, it'll never bloom because it blooms on that new wood. So I can cut that back early in the spring and rejuvenate it so that it blooms on that new wood. Now, if I cut my oak leaf hydrangea back like that in the spring, I'm not likely to get any blooms because it blooms on old wood. So typically your early spring blooming plants are the ones that bloom on old wood: forsythia, lilac, fothergilla, witch hazel. They form their blooms in July and August. Their flower buds are already developing in July and August. So the rule of thumb is, if you're going to prune it after it finishes blooming. Now, my smooth hydrangeas, I don't prune any of my other hydrangeas. I have very large ones. I don't prune any of the other ones except for limelight. And the only reason I prune is because I want to keep it nice and compact right there by my window. But out in the landscape, I let them go. So look for the bloom. Same thing with clematis. Does it bloom on new wood or old wood? If old wood from last year, it blooms on that wood, then you cut it back after it finishes blooming. If it blooms on the new growth that comes up this season, then you can prune it before it grows.
Okay. How about low growing evergreens? This person has a question, ground cover, low maintenance, something for like a log home rustic look.
Well, if it's a log home and a lot of shade, I'd stay away from any of the junipers because they like sun. Taxus the Taxus media everlow will grow in the shade somewhat. But what you might want to think about maybe is a perennial liriope, maybe some of the perennial grasses that will stay low, some of the sedges that will stay low, because low maintenance, if you had a ground cover like blue rug juniper or any of the low growing junipers and you got a bagwood infestation, it would be a problem if you had a lot of them in a ground cover situation. So I would probably switch and go look at some of the sedges, some of the rushes, and some of the liriopes.
Interesting. Well, what are your thoughts on forsythia?
I love forsythia. I mean, my goal is to have something in bloom all season long. So I have I forget which cultivar it is, but it's a more compact cultivar. I do look for a lot of the cultivars in some cases because they do have better growth habits. Your species forsythia is going to get 15 feet tall. Naturally, it grows upright and arching. So you have this bare at the base and these beautiful flowers. If you have space for that, that's wonderful. Most people don't have space for that. So what do? Square it off. And if they square it off at the wrong time of the year, then they won't have flowers. So it is something that I would look for a cultivar if you didn't have space, but I love forsythias for that, that just tells people spring is here.
Yes. Okay, how about two more questions? It's already 7:10, amazingly. So we'll do two more and then we'll let everybody go off to their evenings. How about, could you recommend a shrub that'll do well in shade?
Oh, gosh. So even as you take a walk in a woodland area, you will see some shrubs. Lindera benzoin or, oh gosh, what is this common name?
Spice bush.
Spice bush. Spice bush as well. It does well. It's a larger shrub, but it'll do well in shade. Your species, hydrangea will do well in shade, quite well in shade. Again, burning bush will do okay in shade, but I kind of hate to recommend burning bush just because of that potential for invasiveness. Your Colquitzia would do okay in shade. You won't get a lot of flowers, but you will get a nice yellow color to it. Absolutely, your witch hazels will do really good in shade. Your Fothergilla actually will do quite well in shade, because if you look at it where it is at Howlett Hall there, it's not really getting a lot of hot full sun all day long, and it does quite well there in shade. I would say that, well, and your Calycanthus, your Carolina allspice will do really well in shade. Those are shrubs that will do quite well in shade. You know, all these plants will grow in shade. It's just a matter of, will they get really thick and nice and bloom and you know, be nice and thick and compact, or will they be open and more spindly? The last group I had, the hollies, the kalmia, the leucothoe, the ilex glabra, ilex crenata, those will grow in shade and they won't do all that bad.
Okay. Last question. How about, you know how we've been learning a lot from Doug Talamay about food for caterpillars, and that's on a lot of our minds. So what about bushes for caterpillars? Can you recommend any?
Well, your Carolina allspice is the swallowtail caterpillar. And gosh, in terms of the caterpillars, I cannot tell you specific caterpillars and what they specifically like in terms of shrubs, except for the Carolina allspice. I know for sure is, oh yeah, Carolina allspice. Lindera benzoin spice bush is for the which butterfly. I knew that is host to one specific butterfly. Yes. And those of you who are in the chat and you guys are experts on your pollinators, spice bush is, I forget.
Is it zebra?
I think it is zebra.
Or is that pawpaw? That might be, I don't know.
I think it is the spice bush is a zebra swallowtail, but don't quote me on that because I am not good on pollinator shrubs in terms of the larval stages. But
it kind of sounds like the Carolina, what is it? The Carolina spice? Carolina
allspice.
Allspice is the winner of the night.
It's a good one, I'll tell you. And there are some cultivars that have really big flowers and are a little more compact. So if I were to do it over again, I would look for a cultivar. I have 3 of them over here in my landscape and I am cutting them back constantly. I'm about ready to pull a few of them out and just have one left over because they're really spreading.
All right, Pam. Well, thank you so much. That was so informative and wonderful. There was so much to learn and look at. I loved your photos. Thank you so much.
There I saw, yes, I do recommend viburnums. I love viburnums. They are my favorite. They're much larger. In most cases, I have a prunifolium, which is fabulous. It is native. It is absolutely wonderful for butterflies, birds, pollinators. The birds love the fruits. So there are lots of good viburnums, but they typically are larger. Everybody grows the Korean spice or Carlisi, you know, the one that's fragrant in the spring, but most of our viburnums are really large. The ones that I don't recommend are the ones that are susceptible to the viburnum leaf beetle, which are up in Northeast Ohio. They have been seen in Toledo. So I tend to stay away from those species, but I love viburnums. They're just big and I didn't put them in this talk. All right, Julia.
Wonderful. All right, everybody. Thank you all so much. Thank you again, Pam.
Yep.
And we hope to see you all again in 1 more month.
And Julia, you and I won't see each other the rest of the night, right?
No, we won't. Woo, big day.
It's been a big day. Thank you. See you later.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.